Assalamu alaikum and welcome to TESOL Arabia's virtual conference 2020. This session is entitled Transformational Supervision of Future TESOL TEFL Teachers During the Pandemic, and is being presented by Dr. Alia Mitchell, who is the Vice Dean of Educational Services and Director of the Teaching and Learning Center at Princeton University in Riyadh, Saudi. The overview of today's session. We'll start off with a reflective activity, the introduction, the impact of the pandemic, transformational education, discussion, conclusion, and then Q&A. So we'll start off with a reflective activity. Please take 1-2 minutes and reflect on how this photo can be used in a young learner's second language classroom. Now, I want you to go one step further. How can it be used to guide student teachers to use as an activity inside the second language classroom? Okay, now just keep these things in mind as we move forward through the slide, and think about how you supervise student teachers and the impact that we have upon them as they experience and become practitioners in the field of English language teaching. Since today's session is about transformational supervision of future TESOL or TEFL teachers, with a focus of what has occurred during the pandemic, I think the key things to highlight are educational practices and how they have been shifted to online environments with the use of various tools, Zoom, like what I'm currently using to record this presentation, which raises a question. Are teacher programs paired to train the future teachers for this new era of education? So in essence, this presentation is an attempt to have a better understanding of the current practices within the higher education institutions and the impact this transformative educational change has had on organizational cultures. It's important to keep in mind that being adaptable to change in higher education is crucial at this time in light of the changes due to the pandemic. There's a strong need to investigate actual practices of responsive supervisory styles and the impact that it is making on the current teacher training programs in the field of TESOL or TEFL to monitor and counterbalance the impact that the pandemic has had on the educational systems across the globe. So what has happened this transformation and pandemic? What has happened to supervision of student teachers? And when we reflect and we think about it, online education during the pandemic and the impact it has had on teacher training, we can look at key aspects. Number one, it's had to be shifted and implemented remotely. 2, guidelines had to be created to support the new online environment. 3, professional development needs to support the technological competencies for both the teachers and the student teachers. And 4th, patience, flexibility, and adaptability needed to be incorporated into the programs. So what is transformational education all about? This presentation highlights several studies that were conducted during the pandemic in order to raise awareness and support the transformational change of teacher programs. Connie et al. In one of those studies where they investigated early career teachers during the pandemic by using survey. The analysis was twofold. One, the extent to which the early career teachers maintained social contact with students and mastered core teaching challenges. And two, they also explored for the following potential factors that could have an impact on this relationship and what is occurring for early career teachers or student teachers, if you will. School computer technology, teacher competence such as their technological pedagogical knowledge, and teacher education learning opportunities pertaining to digital teaching and learning. Interestingly, results of their study highlighted the following points. Based on the regression analysis in the that they ran, the data revealed the following. Information and communication technologies, tools, particularly digital teacher competence, and teacher education opportunities to learn digital competence are instrumental in adapting to online teaching during COVID-19 school closures. So the question that arises from their findings is, what does this mean for teacher education programs? And evidence suggests that there are new opportunities afforded for teaching and learning practices. Incorporating the application of digital tools into the curricula of teacher education programs is crucial. And programs need a support system or infrastructure in their institutions that allows for incorporating digital competencies into the program. And from this, two questions can be raised. What is being done during the pandemic to support learning for students in these programs? And how should the curriculum be adapted to address these issues moving forward? Sorry. The OECD report entitled Supporting the Creation of Teaching and Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemic emphasized upon three aspects that need to be considered. One, curriculum resources. Two, professional development resources. And three, tools. So if we look at curriculum resources, these include lessons, videos, interactive learning modules, and any other resources that directly support students in acquiring knowledge and skills. And they have available in this report a list of like 72 courses. For the second one, professional development, these are resources which can support or parents in supporting learners, guiding them to content, developing their skills to teach remotely, or more generally augmenting their capacity to support learners now learning more independently and at home rather than at school. And then they provide around 21 different resources in that line. Lastly, with the tools, here they talk about including tools that can help manage teaching and learning, such as communication tools, learning management systems, or other tools that teachers, parents, or students can use to create or access educational content. And then again, they also provide around 20 resources that can be used. Furthermore, Holowik and Nusick in 2020 believe that the pandemic has afforded the opportunity to break away from the status quo and transform education. Their research, they examined the current situation of COVID-19 and educational practices using the professional capital framework developed by Hargreaves and Fullen. Their aim was to investigate endemic pedagogies and professionalism. And interestingly, their key findings talk about in the beginning where institutions were using emergency remote teaching and learning strategies. And this, I don't know about for all of you, but for me, this is what happened at my institution. And this gets in like it happened overnight. Uh, we switched to online education. Uh, one day we were face to face, the next day we were teaching online. And this has led to a large number of repercussions for pedagogy and professionalism during this time, and even possibly beyond it. And these are all things that we need to be thinking about and incorporating into our uh, teacher education programs. They claim that this time should be used for good by rethinking or shaping the focus on professional capital and develop methods that support growth among teachers' knowledge and skills, creating supportive collaborative networks, and most importantly, trust and include teachers in the decisions that are being made as well as the communication process. So what are the implications of their findings for the future of education? In essence, until a vaccine is developed, what will happen in education, we're not certain. It's still unknown. We have to be patient and wait and see what happens. However, now is the time to reflect and learn from the largest global experiment that has existed in our lifetimes. We've taken part in this pandemic and a new way of education. So we should reflect and learn and try to think about should schools consider going back to normal? Um, their answer is no. And I agree with them. We shouldn't. It will be something new. We should evolve. We should learn and grow. They support disrupting the status quo for good and improve our educational practices for the betterment of society. They also recommended preparing for hybrid or blended learning approaches moving forward. So what does this all mean for supervision of student teachers? Well, if we want to talk about this, we need to talk about the types of supervision that are currently out there. So McGee et al. Claim there's more need for further research to be conducted in this area, which is one of the main purposes behind this research project, is to foster continuous improvement of TESOL TEFL supervisor teacher trainee relationships that foster and support learning. Their study employed a mixed method approach, utilizing surveys, observations of meetings between the supervisor, teacher, trainee, and semi-structured interviews for both supervisors and the teacher trainees in order to learn more about this relationship and how it can be improved upon. Drago and Severson and Blum Stefano in 2016 also conducted research where they chose to use a comprehensive framework that integrated the following styles of supervision in its investigation: developmental approach, authoritative and facilitative approaches, and their impact on the supervisor teacher trainee relationship. How can we learn from this experience and improve our current practices? Some ideas based on the research I presented and other research that has been conducted is basically reflect on the current situation and develop strategies that will work in our current environment and moving forward. Support student learning, develop professional development opportunities, raise awareness about the digital tools that are available. Uh, Sometimes less is more, knowing the best ways and tools that will support student learning. Build a strong collaborative network among teachers, administrators, and the student teachers. Communication is extremely important, and transparency. So take a few seconds, reflect on your experience and how can you help in reshaping the future of education and supervising student teachers as we move forward in this era of the pandemic. I want to share a quote by Sean Michael Morris. The situation we find ourselves in, though, is much, much worse than that. Mass movement in online spaces for teaching and learning, mostly by faculty, K through 12 teachers and adjunct instructors who are not only inexperienced with digital learning, but who may have resisted it for years, cannot but prove traditional instructional or learning design a deeply flawed and problematic system for teaching and learning online. In a time that requires adaptability, it is not responsive as much as prescriptive, not flexible as much as rigid. So we really need to think about how adaptable and flexible are our current programs. Are we preparing our future student teachers to be adaptable and flexible in our current curricula, as they are going to need this moving forward? Now, since presentation is about supervising future TEFL, TESOL student teachers, the typical role of a supervisory teacher, as you can see, I'm not going to read them all out to you, but it involves a lot to prepare the student teacher and to guide them, acquaint the teacher with pertinent school policies and regulations, philosophy, priorities, assessment criteria, guide the teacher in preparing daily lesson plans, unit plans, tests, guide the student teacher in developing understanding the skills of self-evaluation, help the student teacher relate theory to practice, of course, prepare and submit evaluation reports according to schedule, so on and so forth. But implications of all of this for the supervisor, and where do we go from here? In my humble opinion, supervising teachers have had to adjust their style of supervision. Think about your practices. Some of the things that have happened in my environment is the need to submit evaluation reports online. The student teacher should receive timely and continuous feedback on his or her performance, guidance for the online pedagogies, rethinking their current practices. Not only were we as a higher education institution online, but our teachers in the school systems were having to switch to online as well. Which brings us to the typical role of a student teacher. Become familiar with the school policies, practices, and work in a manner consistent with them. Plan thoroughly in writing for all teaching responsibilities. Become familiar with the community and its relationship to the educational program. Be punctual and attend each class daily, whether teaching or not. Continuously evaluate personal progress with the supervising teacher and university supervisor. You know, communication, contact is extremely important. Notify supervisors of any persistent problems in their student teaching, demonstrate the knowledge, instructional assessment, professional competencies that they have developed during their program. And most importantly, as we move forward, we have to keep calm and think about the new normal. These practices have to evolve and change because, which leads us to a paradigm shift. It is upon us in higher education to rethink our curricula, rethink teaching programs, and our practices. I mean, it's an aha moment. It's an opportunity for us to have a shift in our attitudes. It's a wake-up call, an eye-opening experience for us to grow and develop and transform our current practices so that we can improve what is currently happening inside our programs. Now, with the online environment, since we're guiding our student teachers and supervising them for the current pandemic impact on education and the online environment, We now have new terminology they need to learn: open camera, mute, unmute, turn on, can you see my screen, can you hear me? All of these things continuously occur. So if we're going to talk about online environment and then how we can incorporate it and the curricula and support our future student teachers, some definitions should be mentioned. So online education is a type of education instruction that is delivered via the internet to students using their home computers. And then you can either have synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous is where you're online at the same time and for the teaching and learning experience that is occurring. Asynchronous is when the interaction takes place over time. So it's like what is happening right now with this presentation is being pre-recorded. So it will be an asynchronous experience. And then Robert Monroe, director of the Online Hybrid MBA, said that a high quality degree earned in an online format should not fundamentally differ from a campus-based degree. The only significant difference should be the way that the classes are delivered, basically in the online environment. Also, Bill Pez, a professor of psychology and the Sloan Consortium Award for Excellence in Online Teaching winner, provide 3 principles of effective online pedagogy. Principle 1 is basically let students do most of the work. The more time students spend engaged with the content, the more they will learn. Principle 2, interactivity is the heart and soul of effective asynchronous learning. And then of course, principle 3, strive for presence on 3 levels: social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And all 3 of these are extremely important in the online teaching environment and should be incorporated into the curricula. Also, knowledge of pedagogy. Authors Coe and Rawson in the book Teaching Online, A Practical Guide assert techies don't necessarily make the best online instructors. An interest in pedagogy should come first, technology second. As I stated previously, sometimes less is more, and knowing which tool to use effectively is extremely important. And it's also important to make the technology as transparent as possible, and it should be viewed as a tool to enable learning the content of the course. And a theory that I like and that I have been using quite frequently in training programs at my own institution is called the Community of Inquiry Framework. And if you know, it uses teaching presence, the social presence, and the cognitive presence, and it emphasizes how they can all work together to make a successful community of inquiry in our educational practice. And if you'd like to learn more about this theory, this is the a link for more information that you can obviously read on your own time. Another important to talk about is innovation and creativity. And I like this quote by Kathy Moore. The most important principle for designing lively e-learning is to see e-learning design not as information design, but as designing an experience. And this is exactly what we should be thinking about when we're talking about our educational practices. It should be designing an experience. And then communicate regularly and be responsive. These are all things that need to be incorporated into the curricula and to help student teachers. If I'm supervising a student teacher, I need to be guiding them and showing them how to be doing all offline availability. It can be controlled, obviously, office hours, email, WhatsApp groups. Online education requires preparation to increase interactivity across the 3 areas that I mentioned previously. It requires a lot of preparation, whether it's the teacher presence, the social, or the content. Teacher-student interactivity. There are lots of tools that are available, and students in the teacher training programs need to be aware of the discussion boards, how to use the chat box effectively, Google Hangouts, WhatsApp groups, forums, announcements via LMS or Google Classroom, whatever tools you happen to be using. Teacher-student student interactivity, we have to be creative with how to interact with our students online, because face-to-face communication is not available. So we need to be as creative as possible. And this also needs to be incorporated into the curricula to help support student teachers in this current environment. Another thing, and I'm just giving you an example from a couple of my students, provide areas and ways for them to interact. And this photo is from one of my WhatsApp groups that a fellow student shared when one of classmates asked about person and what should be used. So she just explained it, was able to explain it with a nice little clip there. And the last, I want to emphasize is we can do it. We need to be prepared for online education. And with your help, students can experience the same quality of education that is expected within the classroom online. So where do we begin? Robert Marzano, in his book, Effective Supervision, Supporting the Art and Science of Teaching, says the first step for any teacher who seeks to increase his or her pedagogical skills regarding strategies and behaviors of in the classroom is to identify and focus on specific areas of pedagogical strength and weakness. In conclusion, I'd like to end on a quote from Helen Keller. A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. They're my references. And thank you for joining this session. These are my contact details if you should have any questions. Thank you.